All right, buckle up, everybody. We're diving deep into the EU's AI Act today.
We're talking serious AI regulation here, folks.
Yeah, you guys sent in a ton of research.
A whole mountain of it.
Want us to break it down, make sense of it all?
Give you the key takeaways.
Exactly.
What this new law actually means.
What it means for the future of AI.
And just enough fascinating detail
To
to
make you the most informed person at your next dinner party.
like you'll be dropping AI Act knowledge bombs all night.
Consider this your crash course.
We're gonna make you the AI Act whisperer.
Exactly. We've got excerpts from a policy brief
Fresh from the oven.
by researchers at the European Commission's Joint Research Center.
These are the folks shaping how this law will actually work.
Straight from the source.
No secondhand information here.
It came into force in August 2024,
Yeah, just a couple of months ago.
but the real impact hits businesses in August 2026.
Tick-tock.
Clock is ticking.
That's right.
And it's not about regulating every chatbot and algorithm.
Oh no, this is targeted.
The EU is focusing on
This stuff.
high-risk AI systems.
Now that sounds ominous.
I'll admit, when I first heard high-risk AI,
Yeah.
my mind went straight to,
Uh-oh.
sci-fi robots taking over the world.
Classic. But what does it actually mean?
Right, getting down to brass tacks.
In the context of this law.
It's not about robots taking over.
Okay,
Not yet, anyway.
thankfully.
It's about systems that could significantly impact
Impact what?
health, safety,
Okay.
or fundamental rights.
Those are some pretty big things.
Yeah, we're not talking about spam filters here.
So give me an example.
Think about AI being used in healthcare,
Okay.
transportation,
Yeah.
law enforcement,
High stakes.
things that could have really serious consequences if they go wrong.
So it's not just about AI that's
Yeah.
bad in some abstract sense,
Right.
but AI that has the potential
Yeah.
to cause real harm in very specific real-world situations.
Exactly. Real-world impact is the focus here. And the report dives into specific types of AI systems.
That fall under this umbrella.
It's high-risk category.
Like computer vision, for instance.
Oh.
Natural language processing.
Those are everywhere these days, right?
Absolutely.
You're like fishing.
You got it in self-driving cars, facial recognition,
Right.
even those filters on social media.
I never thought about that.
Oh yeah, it's all over.
And then natural language processing.
You're talking ChatGPT,
Yes.
virtual assistants,
All those things that seem to know everything.
like they're reading your mind.
Yeah. Okay, so the EU wants to regulate this high-risk AI,
They want to get ahead of the curve.
but how
That's the big question.
are they actually going to do that?
Well, the AI Act lays out a set of requirements
Requirement.
for AI developers.
Like a rule book.
More like a checklist
Okay.
for responsible AI.
No more.
Yeah,
Move fast and break things.
exactly. The focus is on building trust and putting people first.
Okay, I like where this is going. What's on this checklist?
One of the biggies.
Hit me with it.
Risk management.
Risk management, but isn't that like a business term?
Yeah, people often think about protecting a company's profits.
Right.
But in this case, it's different.
How so?
It's about protecting people from potential harm.
From the AI system itself.
Exactly.
So it's not just making sure the AI doesn't make a company look bad.
No. Yeah.
It's about making sure it doesn't actually hurt anyone.
Exactly. It's a much higher standard.
Makes sense.
And it's not just identifying risks.
So what else?
You got to figure out how to minimize them.
Give me an example.
This might mean designing safety mechanisms into the system,
Okay.
having human oversight,
Uh-huh.
or even limiting the use of the AI in certain contexts.
Where it's just too risky.
Exactly.
That makes sense, but it also sounds really tricky.
Oh, it definitely is.
I mean, how do you even begin to test for something as complex as bias in AI?
That is a great question. And it's something the standards will need to address.
Standards. What are those?
We'll get into those in a bit, but just think of them as
Okay.
specific guidelines for how to actually do all this.
Got it.
So testing for bias could involve analyzing the data used to train the AI.
Looking for what? Like patterns of bias?
Yeah, like underrepresentation or overrepresentation of certain groups.
Okay.
You could also conduct audits to assess fairness.
Audits. Interesting.
And there's even something called red teaming.
Red teaming. Now that sounds...
A little bit, yeah.
We'll explain that more later.
Okay, what else is on this checklist?
Data quality and governance.
Data. That's like the foundation of AI, right?
Especially for these machine learning systems.
Yeah, garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly.
So what does that mean in this context?
The AI Act is laser-focused
Laser-focused, okay.
on making sure the data used to train these systems is
That's what?
accurate, representative, free from bias.
Because if you train an AI on biased data,
You're going to get biased results. Yeah, makes sense.
and that can have serious consequences.
Especially when we're talking about these high-risk systems.
Absolutely.
So it's not just about having data.
It's about having the right data.
And how do they make sure of that?
That's where these standards come in again.
Okay.
They'll likely focus on things like
Like what?
data provenance,
Data provenance?
basically where the data comes from,
Okay.
and data labeling practices.
Labeling practices, how you categorize the data.
Exactly. Because even that can introduce bias.
Wow, so even something as seemingly simple as labeling data
It can have a huge impact
can make or break the whole thing.
on whether an AI system is fair and unbiased.
It's all connected.
It really is.
What else is on the checklist?
Transparency and human oversight.
Okay, break those down for me.
No more black box AI.
I've heard that term before.
It means you don't know what's going on inside.
Yes, magic.
The Act pushes for clear explanations
Explanations of what?
of how these systems work.
So people can actually understand
Yeah, lift the curtain a bit.
what's going on.
And it emphasizes that humans should be able to intervene if necessary.
Especially in those high-risk situations.
Exactly. You don't want the AI making life or death decisions without any human input,
So no more AI making decisions without anyone understanding why?
and making sure humans have the ability to step in and take control.
If things start to go sideways,
Precisely.
what's next on the checklist?
Accuracy.
Accuracy, okay.
Hey, robustness.
Robustness and series security.
Okay, let's unpack those.
All right, accuracy.
Means what?
The AI needs to do what it's supposed to do
Sounds simple enough.
and do it correctly.
So, if it's supposed to identify cats in pictures,
It better not be labeling dogs as cats.
right, that seems pretty straightforward.
It's the foundation.
What about robustness?
Robustness means the AI can handle unexpected situations.
Like what?
Errors, changes in its environment,
Without breaking down.
without falling apart.
Give me an example.
Think about a self-driving car.
It needs to be able to handle bad weather, road construction,
Crazy drivers.
other drivers making mistakes.
Yeah, all those real-world things.
Exactly.
If it encounters something it wasn't expecting,
It shouldn't just freeze up.
or crash.
Exactly. It needs to be able to adapt.
So it's about making sure the AI can function effectively,
Even when things don't go according to plan.
which, let's be honest, is pretty much always.
Yeah, real life is messy.
And finally, there's cybersecurity.
Another big one.
Why is that so important when we're talking about AI?
Because AI systems are software,
Software, yeah.
and software can be vulnerable to attack.
Like hacking.
Exactly.
And as AI becomes more integrated into critical systems,
Think healthcare, finance,
that's the
transportation,
usual stuff.
cybersecurity becomes even more crucial.
Because if someone can hack into an AI system that's
Probably
controlling a power grid,
or a self-driving car,
the consequences could be.
disastrous.
Yeah.
So standards in this area will likely mandate things like regular security audits, penetration testing.
To try to break in and find weaknesses.
Exactly.
And they might also call for things like secure coding practices
Data encryption, access controls,
to prevent unauthorized access.
or manipulation of AI systems.
It sounds like these standards are really trying to address
A whole spectrum.
all the potential pitfalls of AI.
From bias and fairness to accuracy
Example.
and security.
This checklist sounds pretty comprehensive.
They're trying to cover all the bases.
But you mentioned earlier that creating these standards is a slow process.
It's a lot of back and forth.
Lots of different stakeholders.
Trying to find common ground.
And they only have until 2026.
Not a lot of time.
What happens if they're not ready in time?
That's a good question.
Right.
There's definitely a scramble to get these standards finalized.
Mad dash.
You know us.
We love a challenge.
So we've dug through all the technical jargon
All the mind-numbing details.
to bring you the most important bits about what these standards will actually look like.
The juicy stuff.
And what's fascinating is that these standards aren't just about preventing AI from doing something bad.
So it's not just about, like, stopping the robots from turning evil.
It's more nuanced than that.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
They're also about making sure AI does what it's supposed to do
Like, it actually works.
and does it well.
Not just kinda, sorta, but really well.
Exactly.
So it's not just about, like, safety and ethics. It's about making sure AI is actually effective and reliable.
You got it.
Okay, so how does that play out in the AI Act?
Well, it brings us back to the first item on our AI Act checklist.
The checklist, right?
Risk management.
Right, you were saying earlier that risk management in this context goes beyond just
Yeah, it's not just about...
protecting a company's bottom line.
It's about protecting people.
People first.
Precisely. It's about looking at the potential harms an AI system could cause and figuring out.
How to, minimize those harms, make
Sure.
sure they don't happen in the first place.
Yeah. This might involve designing safety mechanisms into the AI system itself.
Building in safeguards from the ground up.
You got it.
Okay.
Having human oversight in place.
So humans are still in the loop,
Absolutely, especially in those high-risk situations.
where the stakes are high.
Exactly.
So.
Or even limiting the use of the AI in certain contexts.
So, some areas where it's just too risky to use AI at all.
Right, like maybe certain medical diagnoses or legal decisions.
Okay, yeah, those are high stakes situations.
Exactly, you need to think through all the potential ways the AI could go wrong and have plans in place to mitigate those risks.
Like a backup plan.
More like a whole set of backup plans.
Okay, that makes sense, but it also sounds really, really challenging.
It definitely is.
Especially when you're dealing with complex concepts like bias.
Bias is a tough one.
Right, we were talking earlier about how even the data you use to train an AI can introduce bias,
It's like a hidden ingredient that can taint the whole recipe.
and that bias can then be reflected in the AI's decisions and actions,
Leading to unfair or discriminatory outcomes.
which is exactly what we're trying to avoid.
That's the whole point of this act, to make sure AI is used fairly and ethically.
So how do these standards address that?
How do you actually test for bias in an AI system?
Yeah, that seems like a really tough nut to crack.
It is, and there's no easy answer.
No silver bullet.
It might involve analyzing the data used to train the AI, looking for patterns of underrepresentation.
Like making sure certain groups aren't left out of the data set.
Exactly.
Okay.
Or overrepresentation of certain groups.
Making sure one group isn't dominating the data.
Right. Balance is key.
Makes sense.
It could also involve conducting audits to assess fairness.
Audits, so independent experts come in and check things over.
Exactly. They look for any red flags or areas where bias might be creeping in.
Okay.
And there's even something called red teaming.
You mentioned that earlier, and I have to admit, it sounds a little bit like something out of a spy movie.
It does have a bit of a cloak and dagger feel to it.
Can you explain a bit more about how that works in the context of AI?
Sure, red teaming is basically about trying to break the system.
Break it on purpose.
Exactly. In the context of AI,
Okay.
it might involve having a team of experts deliberately try to trick the AI
Like setting traps for it
into making biased decisions
to see if it falls for them.
or to expose vulnerabilities in its algorithms.
Find those weak spots
The goal is to find those weaknesses and fix them.
before they cause harm in the real world.
Exactly. It's like a controlled demolition,
Break it in a safe environment.
so you can rebuild it stronger
That makes sense. It's like giving the AI a stress test.
to see how it holds up under pressure.
Exactly. And speaking of things that can put stress on an AI system, let's talk about data,
Data, the fuel that powers AI.
especially those machine learning systems.
They're data hungry.
And just like with any fuel, quality matters.
You can't expect an engine to run smoothly on contaminated fuel.
Right. And you can't expect an AI system to make fair and accurate decisions.
If it's trained on bad data.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. So this idea of data quality and governance is really about
Making sure the AI is getting the right kind of fuel.
the premium stuff.
The good stuff, okay.
Data governance is about managing data responsibly,
So treating it with care.
making sure it's accurate, representative, complete, and free from harmful biases.
It's about thinking carefully about where the data comes from,
Its origins,
how it was collected,
methods used,
and how it's being used.
its purpose.
Because even seemingly small things like how data is labeled can introduce bias, right?
Absolutely. Let's say you're training an AI to recognize different types of objects in images.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
If the people labeling the data have unconscious biases,
Biases they don't even realize they have.
those biases can creep into the AI system itself.
It's like a subconscious infection.
For example, if the majority of images labeled doctor are of men,
The AI might learn to associate the concept of doctor with maleness,
and be less likely to correctly identify women as doctors.
which could have real-world consequences.
Absolutely. It could lead to biased hiring practices or even misdiagnosis.
That's a really clear example of how bias can sneak into an AI system, even if nobody is intentionally trying to make it biased.
It's a reminder that we need to be really, really careful about the data we're feeding these systems.
It's not just about the algorithms, it's about the data itself.
Exactly, and that's why data governance is so important.
It's like setting the ground rules for how data is collected, labeled, and used.
It's about having systems and processes in place to ensure that the data used to train AI is as high quality as possible.
The cream of the crop.
The best of the best.
Okay, so we've talked about risk management and data. What's next on the AI Act checklist?
Transparency and human oversight.
Those sound like important ones.
They're all about making sure AI is accountable to humans, that it's not operating in a black box.
Where nobody understands how it works or why it's making the decisions it's making.
Exactly, no more mysterious algorithms.
Making decisions that impact people's lives without anyone being able to understand why.
Right, the AI needs to be able to explain itself.
Like, here's why I did what I did.
Standards in this area will likely push for clear and understandable explanations of how AI systems work.
So it's not just about knowing what decision the AI made.
It's about understanding why it made that decision.
Like, what factors did it consider?
Exactly, and this is especially important when it comes to high-risk AI systems.
Like those examples we talked about earlier, healthcare, finance, law enforcement.
For example, if an AI is being used to make decisions about loan application
Okay, that's a big one.
or parole eligibility,
High stakes.
we need to be able to understand how it arrived at its decision.
So there's no question of fairness.
We need to know if it's making decisions based on sound logic or if it's picking up on spurious correlations in the data.
Correlations that don't actually mean anything.
Exactly, which could lead to unfair or discriminatory outcomes.
So it's about making sure that AI is actually being fair and impartial.
And not just replicating existing biases that might be present in the data.
It's not enough to just be a fancy calculator.
The AI needs to be ethical,
Okay, that makes sense.
and that's where human oversight comes in.
Humans are still calling the shots.
It's about ensuring that humans have the ability to monitor,
You keep an eye on things,
Therefore,
control,
make adjustments if necessary,
and even override AI systems if necessary.
hit the kill switch if things get out of hand,
Exactly, especially in high-risk situations.
where consequences could be severe.
The goal is to make sure AI remains a tool that empowers humans,
A tool, not a replacement.
not something that replaces or harms us.
Right, AI should be working for us, not the other way around.
Exactly, and that brings us to the final set of standards on our AI Act checklist.
Hit me with it.
Accuracy, robustness, and cybersecurity.
Okay, let's break those down one by one.
Starting with accuracy.
What does it mean for an AI system to be accurate?
Simply put, it means the AI system needs to produce correct and reliable outputs. So if you ask it a question, it should give you the right answer.
Exactly.
If you give it a task, it should complete it successfully.
It should do what it's supposed to do.
Sounds pretty straightforward.
It's the foundation of trust in AI.
What about robustness?
Robustness means the AI can handle unexpected inputs
Like curveballs.
or changes in its environment.
Things it wasn't specifically programmed to deal with.
Exactly, without breaking down.
Without throwing a digital tantrum.
Think about a self-driving car.
Okay, back to our self-driving car example.
It needs to be able to handle all sorts of unexpected situations.
Bad weather, road construction,
Crazy drivers.
other drivers making mistakes.
Exactly, all those real-world things.
If it encounters something it wasn't expecting,
It shouldn't just freeze up.
or crash.
Exactly, it needs to be able to adapt.
So it's about making sure the AI can function effectively.
Even when things don't go according to plan.
Which, let's be honest, is pretty much always.
Real life is messy.
And finally, there's cybersecurity.
Another crucial one.
Why is that so important in the context of AI?
Because AI systems are software,
Right, lines of code.
and software can be vulnerable to attack.
Hacking, malware, that kind of thing.
Exactly, and as AI becomes more integrated into critical systems,
Healthcare, finance, transportation,
mistakes get even higher.
cybersecurity becomes even more crucial. Because if someone can hack into an AI system that's
Yeah.
controlling a power grid or a self-driving car,
The consequences could be disastrous.
catastrophic.
So standards in this area will likely mandate things like
What kind of things?
regular security audits,
Okay.
penetration testing
Ethical hacking.
to find and fix vulnerabilities.
Make sure the system can withstand attacks.
Exactly. They might also call for things like
Like what?
secure coding practices,
Writing code that's harder to hack,
data encryption,
protecting sensitive information,
access controls.
making sure only authorized personnel can access the system,
Exactly. All these measures are designed to prevent unauthorized access.
or manipulation of AI systems.
It's about building a fortress around the AI.
To keep it safe and secure.
Exactly.
It sounds like these standards are really trying to address all the potential pitfalls of AI.
They're trying to be as comprehensive as possible.
From bias and fairness.
To accuracy, reliability.
Like security.
It's a tall order.
It's a lot to cover.
But it's necessary.
Right, because the potential benefits of AI are huge.
But so are the potential risks.
And we need to find a way to balance those.
Exactly. To harness the power of AI for good.
While also protecting ourselves from its potential harms.
That's the challenge. And that's what the EU's AI Act is trying to do.
It's the bold step.
A step into uncharted territory.
But as you've pointed out, the world of AI is moving incredibly fast.
It's a whirlwind of innovation.
How can these standards possibly keep up with the pace of innovation?
Especially with things like generative AI exploding onto the scene.
Generative AI, that's the stuff that powers ChatGPT, right?
And those AI image generators that are all over social media.
The stuff that can create, like, photorealistic images of people who don't even exist.
It's mind-blowing.
It's both amazing and a little bit terrifying.
Yeah, it's definitely a double-edged sword.
So how do you even begin to regulate something that's evolving so quickly?
That's one of the biggest challenges facing regulators and standards bodies right now.
It's like trying to hit a moving target.
How do you create rules for technology that's constantly changing?
What are some of the strategies being considered to address this challenge?
One approach is to focus on the specific applications of AI.
So instead of trying to regulate generative AI as a whole?
You might have different rules for using generative AI in marketing versus using it in healthcare, for example.
Okay. Yeah, you wouldn't want AI writing prescriptions for patients.
Exactly.
Or making life or death medical decisions.
Right, so it's about thinking carefully about the context in which AI is being used and tailoring the regulations accordingly.
Different rules for different situations.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
Another approach is to focus on transparency and accountability.
We talked about that earlier.
Making sure there are ways to trace back the output of AI systems to their source.
So you can understand how decisions are being made.
And who is ultimately responsible.
So it's about making sure there's a clear chain of responsibility, even when the AI is doing things that humans might not fully understand.
Exactly. It's about making sure that even as AI becomes more sophisticated,
more powerful,
it remains under human control.
Accountable to human value.
You don't want to lose sight of that.
So we've talked about the AI Act checklist.
Risk management, data, transparency,
accuracy, robustness, all the rest.
Cybersecurity, the whole shebang.
But what does this all mean?
What's the bottom line?
What are the potential impacts of this law, both positive and negative?
Well, one of the most significant impacts is that it sets a precedent.
The EU is leading the way.
The first major economic bloc to implement comprehensive regulations for AI.
So even if you don't live in the EU, this could still affect you.
Absolutely. Many companies are going to have to comply with the AI Act if they want to do business in Europe.
The EU is a huge market.
And other countries are likely to watch closely.
See how it all plays out.
And maybe even adopt similar regulations.
So the EU is kind of setting the global standard for AI regulation.
They're definitely at the forefront.
What are some of the potential downsides of the AI Act?
Well, some critics have argued that it could stifle innovation.
Make companies less likely to invest in AI research and development?
Exactly. There's always a risk that regulation can be too burdensome.
Too much red tape.
That it can create barriers to entry for smaller companies.
The little guys get squeezed out.
Or discourage experimentation with new ideas.
People are afraid to try new things because they're worried about breaking the rules.
It's a balancing act.
Right. On the one hand, you want to make sure AI is developed and used responsibly.
You want to protect people from harm.
But on the other hand, you don't want to kill the goose that lays the golden egg.
You don't want to stifle innovation and progress.
It's a tough needle to thread.
And that's why it's so important to get these regulations right.
To find that sweet spot.
Where you're protecting people without stifling innovation.
Okay, so there are potential upsides and potential downsides. It's a complex issue. But at the end of the day, what does this all mean for you, our listener?
What are the key takeaways you should be thinking about?
As you navigate this increasingly AI-powered world, It feels like, we're kind of standing at the edge of something truly transformative.
We're in the midst of a revolution
AI is already changing the world
in ways we probably can't even fully grasp yet.
in profound ways.
And it's only going to become more
powerful,
more pervasive.
more everything.
In the years to come, it's going to be wild.
And that's where the EU's AI Act comes in, right?
It's an attempt to, kind of.
Create a framework.
Yeah, set some ground rules.
Responsible AI development and use.
To make sure that AI is serving humanity.
Not the other way around.
We don't want to be slaves to the machines.
Exactly. And the act, it's a bold step. It's a big deal.
It's definitely making waves.
It's already generating a lot of discussion and debate.
All around the world.
People are taking notice.
Some people are applauding it.
Seeing it as a necessary step.
To prevent AI from running amok.
While others are worried.
That it'll stifle innovation.
Give other countries a competitive edge.
It's a lot to unpack.
And our source material, it specifically calls out
a challenge
of keeping those standards relevant.
Oh, it's a huge challenge.
In the face of such rapid advancements in AI.
The field is moving so fast.
Especially in areas like
generative AI.
Generative AI, right?
That's the stuff that's really shaking things up.
That's the stuff that powers ChatGPT.
And those AI image generators.
And they're all over social media these days.
The stuff that can create like photorealistic images of people who don't even exist.
It's pretty mind-blowing.
It really is.
It's amazing and kind of terrifying at the same time.
It's a double-edged sword for sure.
So how do you even begin to regulate something that's evolving so quickly?
It's the million-dollar question.
It's like trying to hit a moving target.
Policymakers and standards, bodies they're grappling with this right now.
Trying to figure out how to stay ahead of the curve.
One approach.
Yeah, what's that?
Is to focus on the specific applications of AI.
So instead of trying to regulate generative AI as this big monolithic thing,
break it down into smaller pieces.
You might have different rules for using generative AI in marketing.
Versus using it in healthcare, for example.
Right, we talked about that earlier.
Just different contexts call for different rules.
You wouldn't want AI writing prescriptions for patients.
Definitely not.
Making life or death medical decisions.
That's way too risky.
So it's about thinking carefully about the context.
And tailor the regulations accordingly.
No one-size-fits-all solution.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Another approach you mentioned
was focusing on transparency
and accountability.
Those go hand in hand.
What does that look like in practice?
It means making sure there are ways to trace back
the output of AI systems
to their source so we can understand how decisions are being made.
Like follow the breadcrumbs.
And who is ultimately responsible.
So someone is always accountable.
It also means holding developers accountable for any harm caused by their creations.
Even if that harm was unintentional.
Even if it was an accident, because the potential consequences of AI gone wrong are just too great.
So it's not just about preventing bad actors from intentionally using AI for malicious purposes.
It's also about making sure that well-intentioned developers are building AI systems that are
safe,
aligned with human values.
Exactly. It requires a shift in mindset, a move away from the move fast and break things mentality that has dominated the tech industry for so long. So it's about building a culture of responsibility around AI.
Recognizing that this technology has the potential to be incredibly beneficial.
But also incredibly dangerous.
If it's not developed and used thoughtfully.
We need to proceed with caution.
And wisdom.
I think that's a really important point,
What's that?
We need to move beyond the hype.
And the fear.
That surrounds AI.
The sensationalism.
And start having more nuanced conversations about the ethical implications of this technology.
Real conversations. Deep conversations.
We need to ask ourselves
the tough questions.
What kind of future do we want to create with AI?
What role do we want AI to play in our lives?
What are our values?
And how can we ensure that those values are reflected in the way AI's developed and used?
Those are big questions.
They're the questions that matter.
And there are no easy answers.
No simple solutions.
But I think the EU's AI Act it's a good starting point.
It's a step in the right direction.
It's a signal that the world is starting to take the potential risks of AI seriously.
We're waking up to the reality that this technology is powerful and it needs to be handled with care.
And that we're beginning to think about how to harness this technology for good.
While also mitigating its potential harms.
Finding that balance is key.
It's the key to our future with AI.
Well said. Well, on that note,
I think it's time to
wrap up this deep dive into the EU's AI Act.
We've covered a lot of ground today.
We hope you found it informative,
And engaging.
thought-provoking.
And maybe even a little bit inspiring.
Remember, the future of AI is not predetermined.
It's not set in stone.
It's up to all of us to shape it
To make sure it's a future we want to live in.
in a way that benefits humanity.
That's the goal.
Thanks for listening.